Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It's Monday, July 22nd today, and I'm sitting down to make a little talk about the entrance of the sun into the sign of Leo, which is happening today. There's also a grand fire trine closely, not exactly perfecting in the next day or so. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So those are the two things on the agenda for today. Now I'm going to show you a picture of the grand fire trine, and we'll go into that first, and then I'll do a little deeper meditation on the sun's entrance into Leo and how we can hold this sun sign in our hearts. So first of all, let me just illustrate for you the grand fire trine configuration. Now, some people will be really nitpicky. They'll be like, I need that grand fire trine to be absolutely exact, and I'm just not that picky. It's very close. You can see the moon is in Aries, fire sign. Jupiter is in Sagittarius, a fire sign, and Mars is in Leo, a fire sign. Now, the thing that makes this really unique is the sun is also about to enter a fire sign. So I want to talk about what this means in a broader sense, not just as a 24 or even 48-hour period of time where, technically there's some kind of energy you can ride or something like that. We take astrology way too literally sometimes, and the timelines that we live by are the timelines that we die by in astrology when we lack imagination. Astrology is a divinatory art form. We're meant to use astrology as a way of seeing what kinds of things are opening up around what periods of time. But the life that those things have once they appear, that's a different matter. So in the next couple of days, something is coming forth, right? But the effects of that and the window opening due to that, well, we don't know exactly what the timeline of that is like. A close analogy that I can use is like this. If you've ever been surfing before, I'm not any kind of surfer, but I have gone a few times and learned how to catch a wave or two without injuring myself too badly. So when a wave comes, right, and you catch that wave, that's like the moment at which an astrological configuration is peaking, coming through. And that energy that's coming through is not being caused by the planets. The planets are describing the energy that's coming through. The planets are like tarot cards in that they describe different kinds of events caused by so many different energies and forces that we can't always contain or hold with our rational mind. So they act symbolically and tell us this kind of wave is coming. When you catch a wave in the ocean, let's say you're even body surfing or boogie boarding or something like that, how far and how long you're going to ride that wave depends on you, the rider. It depends to a certain extent on the wave, but it also depends on you, the rider. So similarly, when these waves come through, sometimes an astrological transit will come through and you catch that wave. And let's say, for example, that it's an astrological transit that has the power to open you up to spiritual life or a relationship or a job. You may catch that wave and ride it for many, many years, right? So not every single day are we going to catch a wave that lasts that long, but more often than we think we are, we're catching these waves and we're riding them for a long time. The results of them trickle out in our life and expand for a long time, just like light can kind of expand on and on and on and on. So remember that the word Jyotish, one of the words for Indian astrology that's used, is the study of light, and the planets carry light. So we're also thinking about just light that's coming through, and we also have to remember that this is also has a sonic quality to it. These qualities, when they come through, are carrying sound. They carry a kind of music that we have to train ourselves to hear. How does that song fill our lives for many days or many weeks or many years to come? So thinking about transits that way is the first little technical note that I wanted to mention. Because we have a grand fire trine, even though it's not perfect and even though it's a short period of time, doesn't mean it's not a powerful wave that might be really beautiful, that might last for a while. So let's talk about what that looks like. All right, so first thing that you are going to see me do here is advance the chart to show you it perfecting. So here's the moon coming through. I'm going to have to erase my little X's here. Here's the moon coming through, and it's going to catch, there we go. So let me just clear the little red markers now and draw them over. So it's going to catch the moon in Aries is going to catch Mars in Leo, and then progress into a trine with Jupiter in Sagittarius. Now, that grand fire trine configuration, are they all going to be at exactly the same degree? No, but they're pretty darn close. And the moon will contact Jupiter, and then in a few days after, Mars will contact Jupiter as well. So they are all connecting. They're just not doing so all at once, but they're doing so, again, pretty darn close together. So what does that grand fire trine mean? Well, first of all, one really interesting thing to note, again, is that the sun is also entering Leo. Now, in ancient astrology, there was a concept called triplicity rulers. Triplicity rulers were planets that ruled all of the signs of the same element. So you had a triplicity ruler of the fire signs, the water signs, the air signs, and the earth signs. It's a planet that sort of, in general, comes to represent that element and all of the signs of that element. And then, interestingly, there were two different types. There was one that was by night and one that was by day. So, for example, for the fire signs, Jupiter, the triplicity ruler of the fire signs, by night will have a sort of executive power and will be like the sort of the angelic groundskeeper of the fire signs by night. On the other hand, by day, the sun has the groundkeeping duties for all of the fire signs. Okay, so what's happening is, as this grand fire trine is forming, you also see the sun entering a fire sign while Jupiter's in a fire sign. That means both of the triplicity rulers by day and by night are also going to be gradually moving into a trine with one another over the next 2 weeks. The sun goes about a degree a day. So into the end of July and the beginning of August, we have the two triplicity rulers of the fire signs coming through, and that's happening right as a grand fire trine is coming through as well. Well, what does that mean, right? It's like, wow, that's cool. So what? Well, the triplicity rulers are, you can think of the triplicity rulers as like, they grant benefits because the triplicity rulers are connecting all of the signs of the same element. And what you may notice about all of the signs of the same element in the zodiac is that they are all connected by the aspect that we call a trine. So the fire signs literally create a triangle within the circle. Now, that triangle is considered to be very benefic. That shape that emerges between the relationship of these signs within the great circle of the zodiac is considered to be Jupiterian in nature. That means benefic, expansive, growth-oriented, productive. And Jupiter is the planet that's associated with good spirits and allies. So what does this mean? Well, in the next couple of weeks, you can think about joining forces with others for great productive results. You can think about friendship and allies and benefits or benefactors coming through really strongly right now. Because you have both triplicity rulers by day and by night getting together in a fire signs, and it's getting kicked off by a grand fire trine. I'm going to give you an example. Today, I woke up, and during my morning spiritual practice of meditation, I had one of those like just wrenches thrown in my wheel. I wasn't expecting it. It was just something that came up for me. And I was like, wow, I'm really like, this is hard. I don't know what to do about it. So I talked to my wife about it this morning. She had some really good advice, but you know how it is taking advice from the person you're closest to. So I was like, yeah, I'll think about it. You're right. But, so then later in the day, I had a call from a very random person that I wouldn't have ever expected a call from. I kind of forgotten about this person, but someone that I've been meaning actually to get in touch with and sort of get to know better. And it turned out that this person was able to help me with something that I needed help with and was also in need of an astrology reading. So I was able to trade specifically what I needed help with, right? Specifically with a person who also needed my help with astrology. That's a vivid, perfect example, right, of the wave that's coming right now, right? Where allies just drop onto your doorstep. A little guardian angel just whispers in your ear. It tells you the thing you need to know right at the moment. You have a little dream that clarifies something for you. So this is a moment that is like that, not just now, but for a few weeks to come, because of the application of the sun to Jupiter, both in fire signs where they're triplicity rulers. So they grant these benefits and favors. The traditional house of Jupiter was called the 11th house, and it was called the house of good spirit, the good daimon. And the 11th house was called the joy of Jupiter. It's a place, the 11th house, for example, and Jupiter and trines all together and triplicity rulers all together have to do with allies and benefits and things that come and bless or help you. Now, there's a material version of that and there's a spiritual version of that. The material version of that is that they help you get things that you're lusting after. I want a pan of brownies, right? That kind of thing. The spiritual version of it is where you're trying to make steps in your spiritual life, right? You're trying to grow closer to divinity, whatever that looks like, whatever path you might be on. And the allies that come in that form are more like your guides, your teachers, your guardian angels, and so forth. And so watch for those in the coming weeks. Now, why fire in general, though? I mean, let's talk about fire for a second and just sort of zoom out. Fire was considered the rarest and sort of most ethereal and angelic, so to speak, of all of the elements. Most people don't think of fire like that because when we think of fire, we think of like, a bonfire or something like that. But if you've ever seen like a Bunsen burner in like a chemistry lab, and you think about that blue flame, right? That's right at the, the bottom where it's just like the burning of the gas or whatever. And I don't know what's causing that blue, but it's that there's that like sort of rarefied heat, and it looks kind of blue and angelic. Sometimes I use that image to help people think about the way that ancient mystics thought about the element of fire, because it's closer to ether, right? It's coming closer to the invisible. The fire occupied the highest realm of the elements that was closest to the planets, closest to the moon, which was the kind of gatekeeper between the realm of the elements in the material world and the higher worlds of the planets. So fire is also rare and special. Fire is what is considered visionary. And when you imagine something, when something leaps out of your mind or your heart and you think, that's it, that's what I'm going to build, or that's what I want, or that's what I desire, and it just kind of leaps up from this inner impulse or imagined idea, right? That's closer to the elemental sphere of fire. Now, fire is also very willful, can be stubborn, can be unyielding, can be critical, can be inflexible or intolerant. Wants to will the world to the shape of the vision. And so, fire sometimes has a hard time being with control, right? So one thing that's coming through is a lot of power and a lot of force and a lot of vision and a lot of help, right? And that's coming through in the next couple of weeks really nicely. It'll be a nice way to turn the corner from eclipse season, and it's going to put a lot of things into action right away. For example, at the very end of this month, new moon in Leo square to Uranus, right? That's going to kick things off. But this is all taking place within the orb of this Sun Jupiter trine, and also within the context again of which is being kicked off by this grand fire trine today and tomorrow. So the what do I want to say? The action or impulse that's coming through that we want to build on with something will find support quickly. But what we want to be careful of is that it's not impulsive and reckless, and that the kinds of help that we're willing to take doesn't compromise our integrity, because not all help is good help. For example, sometimes a political, like right now, right? Like lots of people are noticing that in politics, it's not really what's good or bad morally. It's, what's politically expedient. And so, it's like, well, I see that as a good thing so long as it brings this kind of result or helps my party get closer to this or that, or, it's like I'm just going to stay away from like right or wrong. It's just, are we getting things done? Are we moving the ball down the field, so to speak? You want to be careful of that mentality, because with fire, sometimes where there's a will, there's a way, and sometimes morality is forced to just get right out of the way, and that's not always good. Our spiritual life right now, if our honest, sincere, everyday prayer, and we can fill it with just a little speck of integrity, of authenticity, says, how can I be a better person? How can I awaken my spirit and my soul? And if we're asking that sincerely, and we're praying that people might come into our life who could be instrumental in helping us with that in one way or another, then we're in for some good luck, I think. So that's the Grand Fire Trine. It's coming through in the next, let's see, tomorrow morning, basically it comes through, but it, again, you can look for the wave to last longer and the effects of the wave to take you farther than you might be imagining right now as well. So don't be afraid to find your center and pray for something authentic and good to come in your life and help you take spiritual steps forward. All right, so that's the first thing I wanted to say. Now let's talk about the sun's entrance into Leo. So I wanted to bring up a few things. One is I'm going to bring a couple of quotes from one of my favorite books by the psychologist James Hillman, who wrote a book called The Thought of the Heart and the Soul of the World. Fantastic book. Here, I'll hold it up so you can see it. If you want to check this book out, I highly recommend it. It's a short read. It's a little dense psychological material in places, but it is so good. So a little academic-y, but if you can bear with it, you'll be greatly rewarded. Now, Leo. So Leo is the home sign of the sun. There is no planet that is exalted in the sign of Leo. The only planet that is given its home in this sign is the sun. And this is a strange place for the sun, right? It's the middle of summer, so on a certain level, it's like, well, it's sunny, so a lot of people kind of go that way. But why would we put the sun on the yin side of the yang? So let me explain what I mean by that. Half of the year is light and half of it is dark in the language of astrology. And remember that this language, it doesn't matter whether you're in one hemisphere or the other. This is an archetypal symbolic language. The solar half of the year versus the lunar half of the year is spring equinox, Aries, all the way through fall equinox, Libra. Now, again, don't take the seasonal part too literally. Just think of the predominance of light and the predominance of dark built into the symbolic structure of this language. So in the light half of the year, there's two stages. There's the spring stage and the summer stage. And those two seasons comprise the light half of the year. In the spring stage, the light is growing or gaining as it's lifting, the arc of the sun is lifting up higher in the sky, going up further north towards the pole star. That's the journey towards summer solstice. The light is gaining, growing, building. That's the yang of the yang, right? And then when you turn the corner at summer solstice, which we did when we reached the sign of Cancer, we start descending down. And then we are, even though the light is still dominant, there is more light in the 24-hour period than there is darkness, we are now heading towards the darkness. The descent is happening. That arc of the sun is starting to drop. So why wouldn't you put the sun right at the beginning or even the middle or even the end at the summer solstice? Why not give the sun the maximal amount of light, right? Why not place it in a zodiacal sign that represents more light or more growing of light? Because the sun is wouldn't you think of the sun as all about light? Why place it in the middle of the summer when the light is starting to decline? It's interesting because that places the sun again on the yin half of the yang. If you ever think about what the yin of the yang is or looks like, a practical image of it is if you've ever seen the circle of the Tao, you'll see the yin and the yang. You'll see that on the light half, there's a little speck of black. And on the black half, there's a little speck of white. That's the yin-yang symbol. So similarly, in the seasonal dynamics of the zodiac, we have a yang of the yang. It's like all white color, just blasting the sun, just heading up, moving towards the summer solstice. And then as it's coming down, but the light still predominates, we have the yin of the yang. And similarly on the other side, when the light's heading down from fall equinox all the way down to winter solstice, we have the yin of the yin. Whereas when we reach winter solstice and the light starts to lift, it starts to lift back up, but it's still more dark than it is light. That's the yang of the yin. So we need to pay close attention to these little subtleties. When we start at Aries, that's the sun's exaltation, and it really represents the sort of most vivid, brilliant, dazzling, qualities. Like if you saw like a violin, right? And you're playing the violin just like, sort of manic and really intense and super beautiful. And you've got one of those like composers with his hair just wild and he's going nuts. Like that's sort of the sun in Aries, right? That's its exaltation. But its real home is in the middle of summer when the sun and the light is declining. It's a fixed sign, or what we call a solid sign, which is a place where there's also a certain kind of seasonal stability. The dog days of summer, for example. It's like, oh my God, how long have we been going through the heat or the humidity or whatever? You get the picture. So there's this kind of solidness in the middle of summer, and yet the light is diminishing. And that specifically, that combination specifically, the light diminishing, even though there's this kind of solid summery quality, that's at the heart of the Leonian or the Leonian, the Leonine archetype. So let's take, for example, the relationship of the sun to the higher intelligence. With the higher intelligence, it's our job to look at all of the things of the world and discern between them, right? So I say what's true and what's false. I think I used the example in a recent video of going into the basement and looking at a rope in a bundle. And if the light's off, you might think it's a snake. The light goes on, you go, oh, that's not a snake, that's a rope. That's what the sun is like in terms of our higher intelligence. It discerns between things and tells us what's true or what's false. Sometimes we have faulty intelligence. So similarly, the real judgment of the higher mind, let's call it the solar higher intelligence, the real judgment ultimately is between spirit and matter, right? So matter is like, it's my body, it's a temporary home, it's beautiful, got to take good care of it, but it'll die someday. And so my higher intelligence has to know that this is temporary, but that my spirit soul, my psyche, the word psyche means soul, that's eternal. And so I start to try to live my life judging between things that will either feed my ego, my body, all of the things that I want or need that are very temporary, versus things that might start to enhance or awaken my understanding of myself as a spiritual being, and things that might bring spiritual happiness. And so higher intelligence in that sense is all about discerning between what is real, ultimately eternal, and what is temporary, and making good decisions, good judgments based on that distinction. This is exactly why the sun is at home in Leo. Because what we need in order to pass through this world with heart, which the sun rules and is related to, what we need to pass through this world with heart is the intelligence to discern what is real and what is unreal in terms of who we really are. My heart, my soul, my spirit is real, and the rest is not. So, and then how do I make choices based on that while living in the world, right? So this is the position of the sun. How do I stabilize, solid sign, a sense of myself as an eternal being with some dharma, some essence, some essential duty or sense of destiny, some spiritual dharma? How do I stabilize my heart and soul in this world with the knowledge that my body is impermanent, that the light is waning, that things will die? So Leo is about courage and dignity in the face of death. In the inevitability of death, Leo says, but I still know who I am as a heart and soul. Now, there's lots of sideshows that come and try to create that sense of I know who I am, and this is what makes me special, right? And the sideshows are all of the shows of the ego. I'm famous, I'm great, I'm powerful, I'm sexy, I've got a big bank account, I've got people praising me, or I've got people not liking me, or, right? Those are all of the sideshows. Similarly, Liz Green, who's one of my favorite psychological astrologers, Liz Green tells the tale of Parsifal and the quest for the Holy Grail. If you've ever seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, it's another version of the story that's actually quite clever. And in the quest for the Grail, which is a very Leonine-like story, it's a very solar story, you're looking for the Grail of immortality. The old king is dying, and the young man has to go, young man or woman, the old queen is dying, whatever we want to say. The young person goes off and in search of something that can save or heal or help the dying king. Think about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Same thing. What is Indiana Jones distracted by in that movie? Vanity. He's distracted by, well, it's unfortunate that it's a little sexist, right? But that's, Hollywood. He's distracted by a beautiful woman who wants to tempt him to take the grail, and they can run and have like a great life with it. Okay, so a little, it's like, okay, that's kind of a cliched storyline, but can we have a more like a more original version of what a woman is? You know what I mean? Like, okay, like they're all just Eve, but yeah. So, but still, you get the idea. Same thing happens in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I forget which knight it is that basically gets sidetracked on his quest by stopping off at a castle full of like exotic women, right? So it's the same thing. But let's take out the piece of it where it's women tempting a man, right? Let's get away from that, and let's think about it instead as side quests that tempt us. I've got to get the house, I've got to get the PhD, or I've got to get to school, or I've got to get my kids to a good school, or all of these things in the world that we think, once I get that, then I'll be squared away, and then I'll be good. I can stand with nobility and pride because I've done a good job. So we have all these side quests in life that we go off on, and we think if I accomplish all of these little side quests, that will establish some sense of eternality. I'll create a lineage. I'll create a legacy. I'll live on beyond myself. I'll be great. I'll do something noble. I'll do something good. I'll do something virtuous. I'll build towers, right? All of this kind of stuff. And yet, if our higher intelligence, the higher light of the sun, has not discerned what is a pursuit that is essentially material in nature, fleeting and impermanent, and what is in the interest of a spirit soul, if we haven't learned to do that, if we haven't sought community, teachers, friends who can help us do that, then we're likely to get lost in, what the yoga philosophers called avidya, which is ignorance. Avidya comes with the word vidya, is related to the word video, right? Where we get the illumination of sight, something projected. Avidya is basically like, we're watching a fake movie, So, and so how do we create the real movie? Wow, where do we find our dharma, our essence? How do we become stabilized in the essence of who we are in the heart without getting lost in all of the side quests? And it's not about the side quests themselves. People will always bring up spiritual bypassing. They'll be like, oh, this sounds like you're trying to say there's nothing in this world, blah, blah, blah. And so I've got to live in this world, so I don't, this doesn't make any sense to me. So we still have to live our lives, and there's lots of side quests that we go on. We just can't mistake them for what is granting us heart and soul, right? Like you accomplishing getting your kid a soccer scholarship, right? Or, or whatever the case might be, winning an important political battle, even if it really is important. These things are fleeting compared to whether or not we're feeding and awakening the reality of our spirit soul. At least if you're going to practice and study astrology, these were the beliefs of our ancient mystical ancestors. So Leo comes at the time of year when the light is dying. So the impermanence is there, and yet we're trying to find a way of establishing eternality within this space that we're in. The kings associated with Leo. Remember, a king is essentially, in the old world, a king or a queen, for that matter, or an emperor even, is thought of as an incarnation of God. And they become the center around which the society is organized. So you have a conflation of church and state. We still have it today in many ways, even though we like to pretend that there's a separation, right? At any rate, so a king at the center, resist the temptation to talk about politics. The king that's at the center, or the queen that's at the center, acts as the space holder, the placeholder, I should say, for eternality, so that everything else can orbit around that, right? And that's why the king is sort of the divine, because in this world, everything's constantly falling apart. The center cannot hold, right? So how do we find a center that can hold and give meaningful order to something and it point us towards something eternal, so that the city is an eternal revolving place, just like the cosmos. And that the center of that is supposed to be the king, who's supposed to be a wise religious or philosophical leader, whether it's a man or a woman. Just ideally, that's just the idea. So let's just say for a minute that, like, this idea of king, most of us are taught that each of us are supposed to be kings in that kind of elevated sense. We're supposed to be gods incarnate who give meaning to everyone else. This breeds narcissism, right? One of Leo's shadow qualities, where we think to ourselves, I am God, and everything that I do matters to everyone else, and I'm here to lift others up. And this is why some of the biggest cliches that we have, that we struggle with, are the pressure to be a redeemer, the pressure to be a healer, the pressure to be a savior, right? The pressure to heal myself, the pressure to be self-empowered. All of this pressure is in some ways related back to this idea that we all think that becoming famous, becoming the center of everything, is how we achieve heart and soul. But it's not. There's a different version of heart, and there's a different version of soul that still access all the grandness, the brilliance, and the beauty of the solar archetype, but that don't try to capitalize on the image of fame or kings or queens or rulers. A great example of this is found in the story of Aslan in the Narnia Chronicles. And not just the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe Aslan, but the Aslan that develops and changes throughout all 7 of the Chronicles, which were actually based on the 7 planets. So read those if you ever want to get a really deep look at a solar archetype. Read how Aslan changes, the lion changes throughout that, because Lewis had a really deep understanding. He's not just a typical king. So similarly, when we're trying to awaken our heart and soul, we can't cast that character in ourselves as a king or a queen, or we're going to be in trouble most of the time. So now to close, I want to read you a couple of quotes from James Hillman's book, The Thought of the Heart and the Soul of the World, and just try to illuminate what a different version of awakening our heart and soul might look like. First of all, Hillman talks about the power of the heart. And this comes from Ibn Arabi. This power of the heart is what is specifically designated by the word hema, a word whose content is perhaps best suggested by the Greek word enthemesis, which signifies the act of meditating, conceiving, imagining, projecting, ardently desiring. In other words, of having something present in the thymos, which is vital force, soul, heart, intention, thought, desire. As he goes on to explain, this hema, the thought of the heart in Ibn Arabi, is so powerful as to make essentially real a being external to the person who is in this condition of enthemesis. So, that's powerful, and that's really esoteric. So let's try to explain what that means. Remember what I said about fire, which the sun is one of the triplicity lords of the fire signs. When we're in deep meditation, the cheap version of which would be like intending to get something, but we're in deep meditation, and the thoughts of the heart start emerging. And if you don't have a meditation practice, guys, got to start one. You just gotta, even if it's 5 minutes a day, just, you'll love it. Give it like a year of your life where you do 5 to 10 minutes a day of meditation. You will be changed forever. I promise you. At any rate, let's say you're in meditation, even just deep thought, and all of a sudden your thought and your mind becomes concentrated on something, and things just start, coming up like little fire flowers in a beautiful, ethereal garden, right? That kind of meditation, right, where things flower up like that, and it's very deep and it's very concentrated. Here, what Hillman is saying is that that power has the ability to actually create real things. Real things can spring forth from that. Similarly, what he goes on to say, and I'm just going to summarize because it's a long passage, but I highly recommend you read this book, is that for our spirit and soul to become real to us, not just ideas, not just, well, I've got a spirit and I've got a soul, and then mistake it for all of our opinions, all of our restless mind stuff. To really start to even get glimpses of our soul, which is very hard to do according to most mystical traditions. To even come close to getting a glimpse of it, we have to enter into the heart and start meditating very deeply. However we do that, sometimes people do it at walks on the woods, sometimes people sing, chant, meditate, pray. When we do that, the thing that's producing, the thing that's flowering these fiery flowers starts to become perceptible to us. And just like real things can come forth from intense concentration in the material sense, spiritually our soul comes forward when we start to see the being that is generating these fiery flowers of imaginal life. He goes on to say later in the chapter, when we fall in love, we begin to imagine. And when we begin to imagine, we fall in love. So there it is. The soul loves to imagine, and imagination reveals the soul. But imagination is not just fancy and daydreaming and thinking about what we want. It's called kama in yoga philosophy, which just means desire or lust. Those kinds of things are fleeting. Those kinds of things don't require any control of the senses or any attempt to try to learn how to control the mind and bring it under the gentle control of the soul. No, really bringing forth the spirit soul requires that we concentrate, that we step in a little bit to an austerity. Like yogis in India, really extreme, they sit in the center of fires. We're not talking about that necessarily, but just for those of us who have busy lives, it may be something as simple as saying, how can I sit down and just let my imagination start to awaken and just really deeply ponder? And the pondering itself becomes self-soothing and self-satisfying when we really think, when we really just have time to think about our problems and our issues. From a standpoint of gentle, relaxed confidence, our heart starts to come forth. Our heart starts to leap out. We start to see it. This is the thing producing the contemplation. And that becomes our best friend. That becomes our hidden, our secret king or queen. And we guard and we protect that king or queen. We don't expose it to the defilement of fame, right? We don't cast it out onto the streets and try to get it a million likes. We protect it because we know how hard it is, how much work and concentration and austerity that it's taken to just get ourselves into a space where we could be gentle, relaxed, confident, and let the heart start imagining so that the spirit might come out. When we fall in love, we begin to imagine. And when we begin to imagine, we fall in love. So that's what I've got for you guys today as a little meditation on the sign of Leo. I hope that you have a beautiful Leo season and that this grand fire trine and the triplicity rulers would bless you. And I pray that you will also, maybe take up a little bit of meditation if you don't already. And meditation is simple, by the way. Just sit and just quiet yourself. Don't worry about if your thoughts come up or not. Just sit for 5 minutes and breathe. Try to close your eyes and be quiet. You'll see the busy thoughts, everything like that. But just 5-10 minutes a day. Don't think too much about what meditation is or isn't. Just sit down and be quiet and breathe. Do it like 5-10 minutes a day. Do it for a year, and I promise you, huge changes. It's changed my life in so many ways that I can't explain, of being a meditator for basically over a decade now of my life. At any rate, many of you already know that. I don't mean to preach to the choir. I also hope that you will remember to offer up the prayer. Not so much where can I find allies that will help me get what I want, but where can I find allies, friends, teachers, guides, angelic help, good luck, whatever it might be, so that I can step deeper into the reality of my heart and soul and the source of my reality, the source of my heart and soul. Okay. And again, if you want to check out the book, it's The Thought of the Heart and Soul of the World. Okay. Take care, guys. Have a good day. Bye.